تعلن عن قطع علاقاتها الدبلوماسية مع إيران.
إذا لغة انصار الصمود وانقلاب السادة بالأيام.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Lina Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Head of the Future Bloc MP Fuad Sneha stresses the need to elect a new head of state, but urges against taking rushed stances over the elections. The Future Movement and its March 14 allies pledged to challenge the release of former Information Minister Sneha, which sparked outrage in the country. And Oxfam says the world's richest 62 people now own as much wealth as half of the world's population. Head of the Future Bloc MP Fuad Sneha stressed the need to elect a new head of state, saying the presidency was not just a Christian affair. Following talks with Maronite Patriarch Shaddai in Kirki, Sneha urged against taking rushed stances over the elections. He made his remarks in the wake of media reports saying Lebanese Forces Chief Samir Jaja was leaning towards the nomination of his rival Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun as president. The election of a head of state is a Lebanese issue because the president represents all the people and he enjoys their consensus, Sneha said, adding that the president should be a figure of unity rather than division. The lawmaker warned that the longer it takes to elect a president, the greater the repercussions of regional developments will have on the country. Lebanese TV networks aired a video showing Sneha giving his testimony to interrogators in the wake of his 2012 arrest over a plot to stage bombings and assassinations in Lebanon in collaboration with a senior Syrian security official named Adnan. The video comes 3 days after Sneha was released from jail on bail under a controversial military court ruling. In the video, Sneha tells the interrogators that he went on Monday to Damascus and he met with Adnan, who told him the explosives will be ready the next day. He then reveals he went back to the Syrian capital a few days later, accompanied by his personal driver, Faris Barakat, who drove another car. Sneha said Adnan then took the car and filled it with the explosives and other bomb-making material. Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi submitted a request to the cabinet to transfer the retrial of former Information Minister Michel Sneha from the military tribunal to the Judicial Council. Rifi also proposed the modification of the military tribunal's jurisdiction to cabinet. Sneha was released on a $100,000 bail last week after he was convicted of terror charges last year in a case that was later annulled. Rifi said the crimes committed by Sneha constitute an attack on the state's security. The minister also included in his request to the cabinet an article pertaining to the establishment of specialized courts that look into terror cases and a ban from trying any civilian before the military tribunal. Civil defense volunteers headed to Syria to contribute to the humanitarian efforts as they say they no longer expect anything from the Lebanese government after failing to grant them full-time employment. Youssef al-Mallah, a spokesperson for the volunteers, described their move to Lebanon's war-torn neighbor as a duty. He said there's no limit to humanitarian work and our fellow colleagues will stay in Lebanon, will look after the Lebanese. Civil defense volunteers vowed to head to Syria to carry out a humanitarian mission following multiple failures of cabinet to approve a decree that would pave the way to make them full-time employees. The volunteers consequently kicked off an open-ended protest last month in Martyr Square. Civil defense volunteers in the coastal Shuf district of Iqlim al-Kharoub and the northern Batroun district blocked roads on officials' inaction to prevent their colleagues from heading to Syria. The families of the volunteers also briefly blocked the Jiyeh highway south of Beirut with burning tires. Opposition activists say ISIS fighters have captured new areas near the eastern Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the militants captured areas just north of the city, including an army base and an arms depot in the village of Ayash. ISIS controls most of Deir ez-Zor province and much of the capital with the same name, while the government controls several districts in the northern part of the city and the adjacent military airport. Syria's government said ISIS killed 300 people in an appalling massacre in the city of Deir ez-Zor over the weekend. British MPs will debate on whether U.S. Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump should be banned from the UK. That's coming up next. Welcome back. Iran denounced new U.S. sanctions on its missile program, but pushed ahead with international cooperation after its historic nuclear deal. World leaders hailed the implementation of the deal and the subsequent lifting of European and U.S. sanctions as a milestone in international diplomacy. But in a sign that tensions persist, the U.S. Treasury announced it was imposing sanctions on 5 Iranian nationals and a network of companies based in the UAE and China in connection with Iran's ballistic missile program. Iran's foreign ministry decried the new measures as illegitimate, insisting the missile program has no links with the nuclear issue. It said Iran will respond by accelerating its legal ballistic missile program and boosting defense capabilities. Cooperation on the nuclear program was moving forward, however, with International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Yukiya Amano in Tehran for talks with senior officials on Iran's continued compliance with the deal. At least 20 people were killed in an airstrike by the Saudi-led coalition targeting a building used by police and rebel forces in Yemen's capital. Officials say 15 people were wounded and about 30 others are believed to be trapped under the debris of the badly damaged building in central Sana'a. Police vehicles parked in the facility's courtyard were destroyed and nearby homes suffered some damage. Officials say the dead and wounded were policemen and Houthi rebels. Turkish military raiders showed that ISIS outposts inside Syria had fired on the southeastern border town of Kilis. Turkish military sources in the region said the army retaliated in kind against ISIS after the firing, which the office of the Kilis governor said had struck a school in the town, killing 1 person and wounding another. The world's richest 62 people now own as much wealth as half of the world's population. This is according to a report by the charity Oxfam, which states that super-rich individuals saw an increase of 44% since 2010, taking their cumulative wealth to $1.76 trillion, the equivalent of the total owned by 3.5 billion of the world's poorest people. The UK-based charity also said tax havens were helping corporations and individuals to stash away about $7.6 trillion, depriving governments of $190 billion in tax revenue every year. Oxfam added there were no appropriate mechanisms to check if wealth was being shared appropriately. Referring to economic growth in Western countries, the organization said little wealth was reaching the impoverished. British lawmakers are united in their condemnation of Donald Trump's comments on Muslims, but they can't agree on whether the U.S. Republican presidential frontrunner should be banned from the UK. It follows Trump's call late last year for all Muslims to be barred from entering America. British members of Parliament are preparing to debate on the issue today. The debate was triggered after more than 500,000 Brits signed an online petition calling for Trump to be banned from the UK, calling his views tantamount to hate speech. Trump has threatened to cancel over £700 million of planned investments in golf courses in Scotland if he was banned.
I'm sure there are lots of more pressing issues, but our view is that members of the public should have a voice in the Commons, and this was an issue that was clearly important to many members of the public and therefore deserves a full debate. My own view really is, it's a difficult issue, but my own view is that Mr. Trump is best dealt with by ridicule rather than by making him a martyr, which is clearly what he wants. We ought to defeat him by argument, since he clearly hasn't even read the Constitution of the United States, which says that all men are created equal.
I don't want him in my country. He clearly doesn't want me in his country for no good reason, and that's why I don't think we should be allowing Donald Trump to come into our country and spread some of his poisonous rhetoric. He's not conducive to the public good. We have rules in our country that state that if figures are not conducive to the public good, they shouldn't be allowed into the country. We shouldn't be making exceptions for billionaire politicians.
If the government does try to ban him, he could well get some smart lawyers, appeal, and then be allowed in and come here triumphantly pressing his views. But we want to tackle his views and do them head on. If he wants to come here, I'd be delighted to show him round, and I'd be delighted if he can show me where these non-existent no-go areas are. There's no reason why we shouldn't admire America and admire her history and admire her contribution to democracy over many centuries, but also object to particular individuals. But I don't want to assist Donald Trump in any way, and I think that's the view of nearly all MPs. And we could perversely, by banning him, increase his standing amongst his supporters in America.
Democratic White House contender Bernie Sanders put frontrunner Hillary Clinton on the defensive at a debate yesterday, criticizing her for her stance on healthcare and sparring with her over healthcare. Sanders highlighted his own rise in opinion polls and showed a new level of fight at the most contentious of the 4 debates in the race to find a Democratic presidential nominee.
Well, I think Secretary Clinton knows that what she says is very disingenuous. I have a D- voting record from the NRA. We should not be selling military-style assault weapons. I have supported from day one an instant background check to make certain that people who should not have guns do not have guns.
I have made it clear, based on Senator Sanders' own record, that he has voted with the NRA, with the gun lobby, numerous times. He voted against the Brady bill 5 times. He voted for what we call the Charleston loophole.
My proposal: provide health care to all people, get private insurance out of health insurance, lower the cost of health care for middle-class families by $5,000. That's the vision we need to take.
Well, if I can, you know, I have to say I'm not sure whether we're talking about the plan you just introduced tonight or we're talking about the plan you introduced 9 times in the Congress, but the fact is we have the Affordable Care Act. Now, there are things we can do to improve it, but to tear it up and start over again, pushing our country back into that kind of a contentious debate, I think is the wrong direction.
I have to talk about something that's actually working in our state.
No one is tearing this up. We're going to go forward. But what the Secretary neglected to mention, not just the 29 million still have no health insurance, that even more are underinsured with huge co-payments and deductibles. Tell me why. Polling, guess what? We are running ahead of Secretary Clinton in terms of taking on my good friend Donald Trump, beating him by 19 points in New Hampshire, 13 points in the last national poll that I saw.
Well, my relationship with him, it's interesting. It's it's one, I think, of respect. We've had some very tough dealings with one another, and I know that he's someone that you have to continually stand up to, because, like many bullies, he is somebody who will take as much as he possibly can unless you do.
And I mean this seriously. You know that. We've been through this. Yes, his behavior was deplorable. Have I ever once said a word about that issue? No, I have not. I'm going to debate Secretary Clinton and Governor Malley on the issues facing the American people, not Bill Clinton's personal behavior.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Head of the Future Bloc MP Fuad Sneha stresses the need to elect a new head of state, but urges against taking rushed stances over the elections. The Future Movement and its March 14 allies pledged to challenge the release of former Information Minister Sneha, which sparked outrage in the country. And Oxfam says the world's richest 62 people now own as much wealth as half of the world's population. Those are your headlines for this Monday. I'm Linda Tamim, and I will see you again tomorrow for more updates. Take care.
تعلن عن قطع علاقاتها الدبلوماسية مع إيران.
إلى لغة الصومد وانقلاب السادة بالأيام.